one thing today, and it's put down your mobile devices and hang out with each other, enjoy the day. As I reflect back 19 years ago to age myself, you'll never forget this day, and nothing matters today other than the family and friends that are here to celebrate that. So congratulations to everybody. And before we start, all the military, veteran or active duty, if you could stand up and be recognized by this crowd. You know, in life I've found that if you tell someone a fact, they may learn it, right? You tell them the truth, they'll probably believe you, but if you tell them a powerful story, that's what lives in people's hearts and minds. And I'm very honored to be here to celebrate with y'all and share a few stories. I've had some amazing people and experiences that have crossed my path, courtesy of the good Lord, and that have led me to the place I am today. And so I'm excited to share just a couple stories with y'all. 3 big goals for the group. One, nobody passes out, right? That wasn't a goal, but I'm looking out there with all these fans going. But more importantly, that we push the envelope of human emotion, right? For the few minutes we're together, we laugh, hopefully we cry. 2, that I do a better job than my commencement speaker did at the University of Kansas, because I have no idea who the guy was, and I do not remember a thing he said to me. So I'm taking a lot of personal pride there. And 3, that maybe you walk out of here with a skill or a perspective, a final lesson, if you will, that has a positive impact on every day you're blessed to live for the rest of your life. Recognize these signs of synchronicity in your life, but also understand that even if you do recognize this moment, it's meaningless unless you have the courage or the faith to take action. So let me explain this concept of synchronicity. So I'm an Okie, born and raised in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Anybody from Oklahoma in here at all? Dude, alone and unafraid. No, there's one person. Okay, all right, one person. Excellent. So why was I in Oklahoma? My dad was a professor at Oklahoma State University. So I grew up in a great household. And while I've never been enrolled in his classroom at Oklahoma State, I'm, thank God, enrolled in his classroom of life still to this day. And as a young lad, most of our discussions occurred on the burned out fairways of the Stillwater Country Club. And I remember walking in the crunch of the Bermuda below our feet and the hum of the locusts on those hot July afternoons. And, his topics on life varied, but he always finished with a sturdy refrain. And it was, son, the only truly successful people in life are those rare individuals who identify their passion and then have the courage to pursue it with reckless abandon. Garth Brooks, you guys got to be more awake than this. So Garth Brooks, yes, and a little bit of irony, Garth Brooks is actually my neighbor in Owasso, Oklahoma. He and Trisha Yearwood live next door. I don't ever see them, but they are my neighbors. And but those lyrics would be so relevant in my life at that moment, because my hope and my prayer and my dream was to play golf at Oklahoma State, which is a perennial powerhouse, right? Well, those prayers went unanswered, and I migrate north to the University of Kansas. 2 defining moments of synchronicity. The first one occurred the end of my freshman year. I met this beautiful girl named Jackie, who is my wife and mother of my 5 daughters. So Victoria, Tatum, Mia, Reese, and Devin. Now, you think Iraq is scary. My house in the morning is a very scary place. But that ultimate moment of synchronicity, right? When God puts you together with that one individual that completes you and force multiplies your lives in ways you could never imagine. Second moment actually occurs in a classroom. I'm looking for the easiest class to take at the University of Kansas, and I find what has got to be at Sports Psychology 101. So I enroll in this class. I show up first day. It's my junior year. The fall semester, so it's a hot August morning in Lawrence, Kansas, and I roll through, and there's 2 big wooden doors. I remember walking through these doors, and as I breach those doors, my hunch is confirmed to see pretty much the entire basketball and football team in this class. So I'm like, sweet, no offense to the athletes out there. And so I'm like, I'm in the right place, right? So I take my seat at the back of the room, and the class is supposed to start at 10 o'clock. And I look up at this black and white clock, standard issue on the wall, and it's inching past 10. There's no professor. 10:05, 10:10. At this point, the class is in, complete chaos, right? Stuff flying all over, and I'm getting ready to leave because the professor's going to be a no-show. And in that moment, those 2 big wooden doors open up again. And this good-looking professor walks through. He's in khaki pants, green polo shirt, and walks up to the board, does not acknowledge the chaos in the class at all. And he writes the word volition on the board. And then he takes his place behind his podium, and he waits. It's probably 3 or 4 minutes till the class settles in this kind of deafening silence. He said, "Can anybody tell me what the word volition means?" Nothing. Crickets, right? He said, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's the most powerful word in the world. Volition is the power of choice." He said, every day you wake up, you have a choice. You can be positive, you can be negative. You can choose to love, you can choose to hate. You can choose to be that person that uses your talents in life to make a difference. You can choose to pursue your dreams and your passions, but understand one thing, that your choices will culminate and they will write the legacy known as your life. And with that, he went out those 2 big wooden doors. My soul, demonstrated by the real heroes of the military. And I felt a calling in my life, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I returned home from my second tour of duty. About 6 months later, I would have a defining moment of synchronicity in my life. I'd end up on a commercial airliner, traveling from Chicago O'Hare to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Dark, delayed, crummy spring night in O'Hare. Finally get on this plane, right? I walk through first class. I see this young man. He's in dress Army greens, a corporal sitting in first class, which is kind of odd, but I continue to the back of the plane, and about an hour and a half later, we land in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Captain comes over the PA as we pull up to the gate and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an American hero on board." He goes on to explain that we're carrying the remains of Corporal Brock Buckland on this flight, who was killed in Iraq, and his identical twin brother is in first class, Corporal Brad Buckland, and it brought him those 7,000 miles home from the battlefield. He makes another request to the captain that night that everybody stay in their seats until his remains had been removed from the right cargo hold to honor the sacrifice he had made for our country. And that night I witnessed the other side of war. I watched the Buckland family on the darkest night of their lives out the right-hand side of the airplane. His brothers, his sisters, his parents, his 4-year-old son sat right below the cargo ramp as that American flag-draped coffin inched down from the cargo hold. The ceremony finishes itself up, and I wipe away my tears. I'm a big, tough fighter pilot, right? I grab my backpack, and I look back to the airplane, and I'm as shocked as I've ever been in my life to see that more than half the people had gotten off the plane that night. But that was my moment where God chose me, and I felt it with every fiber in my being that this is what I was supposed to do. So I went home, and I started a nonprofit called the Folds of Honor. And we will have this year almost 8,000 spouses and kids in school all across this great nation, hundreds in the state of North Carolina. Our first recipient is a little boy named Jacob. He's 12 years old, so he's not ready for college yet, but it was Brock's son. And his dreams are empowered to do whatever he wants to do, courtesy of great Americans supporting the Folds of Honor Foundation. I have one ask for everybody here, that as you go out and you do celebrate with your family and friends, and this is a tomorrow ask, that you look us up on the web, that you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and join us as we unite with this amazing group of patriots that want to keep God and country in the center. Team. It's kind of a big deal because typically the President of the United States will ceremonially address the team. And I went there and talked to guys, Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and Bubba Watson, these mega stars, right? And we laughed and we cried. We spent an hour together. It was the only Ryder Cup in history that went to the 17th hole of the final match, and they lost, so I have not gotten invited back. Good, you guys are listening out there. And but at the end of this, a fellow by the name of Tom Lehman comes up to me. He's a British Open champion, won tens of millions of dollars, amazing guy. And he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the moment that my life changed." I said, "Tom, I'd be honored." He said, "Well, I'm not the Tom Lehman you know now." He's like, "I was a guy that was at that place in life where your dreams and reality come together. And for all you graduates, that place will come, I promise. And I just hope that you have the passion and the fire in your heart to push through that moment." Well, Tom's dream was to be a professional golfer. He lost his tour card. He had his first child. He had the opportunity to go be the head men's golf coach at the University of Minnesota. And he collectively made the decision with his wife, this is a responsible thing to do. 2 days later, he gets a phone call from the Wichita Open, little mini tour tournament down in Wichita, Kansas, and he's in as an alternate if he can get there the next day. So he looks at his wife and says, "What the heck? One last rodeo, right?" So he drives down there to Wichita, goes out the next morning, registers for the tournament, but he doesn't have a caddy. So he goes to the local pro and said, "Hey, I need a caddy." He's like, "I'm sorry, Tom, we don't have any caddies left." And he's like, "We don't explain the situation about he can't be embarrassed on top of everything else, right?" He said, "Well, I know this kid, he's a high school wrestler, knows nothing about golf, but he's able-bodied, here's his phone number." Long story short, the kid comes out, carries Tom's bag, goes on to win the golf tournament. His first professional victory, right? Makes $20,000. He says, Dan, I'm looking at my wife. I said, Melissa, this is a sign from God. You know, our dream is alive. We got powder in our gun. Let's go chase this thing. About that time, he looks over and he sees his young caddy on the green. And he looks back to his wife and said, you know, I haven't paid the caddy. And she was like, no big deal. She's like, we don't understand. By the traditions of the game of golf, I owe this young man 10% of my winnings. So that's $2,000. And he immediately steps back. He said, the kid didn't read a putt. He didn't give me a yardage. You know, he did nothing that a caddy is supposed to do to warrant these funds. And Melissa says, you know, Tom, if you pray on this, you'll get the answer. He said, unfortunately, I didn't need to pray on anything. I knew the answer was in my heart. And it wasn't the one I could afford, and it wasn't rational, but I knew I needed to give this kid this money. So he writes this kid this check, $2,000, and the kid's eyeballs are this big, right? And he said, hey, don't cash that for 10 days, all right? Off he goes. And 8 months later, dear Mr. Lehman, it's a letter from this young caddy in the mail. He said, I didn't have a chance to really get to know you, but I wanted to share a little of my life story. He said, I'm the oldest of 9 kids. I've had a rough life. My dad abandoned our family years ago. My mom's an amazing lady. She's tried to make ends meet, but we've really struggled. And I want to be honest, under this pressure in my life, I turned to drugs, I turned to alcohol, and who knows where I would be if there wasn't a high school wrestling coach that noticed me veering off the path and cared enough to bring me under his wing. And I'm so proud to tell you I'm going to graduate high school in a month, but I have a new dream, and that dream is to be the first one to ever go to college in my family. I wanted to let you know that I applied to a small Bible school outside of Wichita, Kansas. I was accepted. The tuition was $2,000. So you can imagine Tom and I are pretty emotional in that moment. And I look at Tom, I said, it must have been so amazing to help that young man. He said, Dan, it was, but that's not why I tell you the story. I said, I tell you the story because that was the moment in my life that God chose me to be part of something bigger than myself. And I'm so humbled that I was part of the bigger plan. But I'm so proud that I recognized that moment. And I had the courage and the faith to take action, right? They have all the answers. And they can be your family. They can be your friends. They can be your co-workers, but they are out there. And they have one goal, and that's to make you a prisoner of common assumption, right? To use fear of failure as the chains that bind your life. These are those timid souls that no doubt will lie on their deathbed and they will look back and they will know in their heart they never had the courage and the faith to pursue that fire that God put in our soul. And God puts a fire in everybody's soul. And He gives you the talents to go out and be successful in that mission of life. It's such a cool metaphor, right? If you look at a candle, there's a flame on top of a candle, and you look at a fire. The wind will blow out a candle, yet it will stoke a fire. You've got to be that fire in life. You've got to crave that resistance, because it is the single common denominator of greatness in this world, is the challenges that are out there. Remember one thing, the test in life will always precede the testimony. The test in your lives will always precede the testimony. What my dad told me when I was 12 years old is relevant. Every day I'm blessed to wake up. Which way does an airplane take off? Into the wind. That beautiful irony as you set out on this incredible journey called life, that resistance of the wind is required for your dreams to take flight. I hope that you leave here and you're armed with the power of volition. Anything is possible. It all depends on your choices. No one else's, your choices. And I hope that you leave here and you become a watcher of the parables of life that unfold around us every day. That power of synchronicity, and understand that every person, every experience is in your path for a reason. It is part of a bigger divine plan called your life. My prayer for everyone in here is that you will go out and you will maximize God's talents and make this world a better place and dominate the gift you have of life. Thank you all.